Who was Abraham? The man who started it all. The journey to Canaan. Abraham, who is now called Abram, begins in Ur. He hears the voice of God, a calling to leave and go to the place God will show him. God promises him greatness beyond imagination, the prosperity of his descendants, a great and mighty nation with wealth and land, things of this nature. At this point in his life, Christianity doesn't exist yet, and the people of this region worship a pantheon of regional gods. In this case, the Sumerian gods, Shamash, Anu, Ishtar, Enlil, Enki. Abraham packs up his things and gets ready to leave. Something most people don't know. We know later in the story that Abraham has over 300 warriors with him, which constitutes a pretty significant fighting force. If you consider that his household includes not only warriors, but servants, and women and children, it is implied that Abraham likely has a caravan of over 2,000 people. This is not some random peasant in Mesopotamia. How he became wealthy in Ur is unknown, but we assume he is part of some affluent pastoral operation. His name now means exalted father, and so you can already imagine this father figure in charge of this huge household, and them like his children. So Abraham travels with his household, including his nephew Lot, to Canaan, building altars along the way as God reassures him he'll become a great nation. Some of these altars actually are preserved today. Now, along the way, it is said the land couldn't sustain all of their goats, so they decide to split up. Back then, groups of goat herds and shepherds would often split up like this to give the goats more grass. No point in grazing the same field when the whole earth is available, says Abraham. Which way do you want to go? Left or right? Lot chooses the well-watered Jordan Valley, and Abraham continues to Hebron. The War of Kings. Conflict comes when Sodom and Gomorrah, along with neighboring states, stop paying tribute to Chedorlaomer of Elam. Elam, Goyim, Shinar, and Elasar form an alliance of 4 kings and attack. Lot, who was in the nearby Jordan Valley at the time, is captured during the battle along with some of Abraham's property. Abram raises 318 trained men from amongst his household and rides out to take back his nephew and his things. He rescues Lot and retreats to Salem. His deeds that night were so great, they granted him an audience with the king of Salem. This is where the story gets interesting. Enter Melchizedek, priest king of Salem. He identifies himself as a servant of El Elyon, the Most High God. For someone who is a king, like some god king / priest king, to discover the religion of the one true God in isolation is truly remarkable. Abram recognizes him as a servant of the same God who called him from Ur, and gives him a tenth of everything he had, the first recorded tithe. Melchizedek rules over what will become Jerusalem, and is later described as part of a priesthood greater than the Levitical line. Jesus also described later as a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. He is described as having no father and no mother. Some scholars believe this to mean his genealogy is unknown or unimportant, while some believe this means he exists separate from time. Melchizedek might be the most powerful magician in the world at this time, maybe ever since, too. The covenant ritual. Now, what is a covenant? A covenant is an arrangement or some sort of binding agreement. Here, it refers to the promises that God has made to Abraham. He has promised to make Abraham's descendants great, and in exchange, Abraham's descendants must be upright before God, i.e., they must not sin. Is this possible? Well, of course not, and so there was a price paid, which we will see. But back to the story. Abraham becomes impatient, but God continues to reassure Abraham. He is being constantly promised land, descendants, greatness, all of those kinds of things, more numerous than the dust of the earth, more than the stars. Bless those who bless you and curse who curses you, etc. 7 different occasions where God promises or reassures him of the great people that he will father. Upon reaching Canaan, God appears and shows him the land. He instructs him on how to perform the ritual that will seal the covenant. God says okay, instructs him to bring a 3-year-old heifer, a goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a pigeon. The larger animals are cut in half, the birds left whole. In between these animals is what is called a blood path. In this ritual, the parties walk the blood path, signifying that whatever happened to the animals shall happen to them if they break this covenant. God walks first as smoke, and before Abraham can walk, God walks a second time as a torch in a fire pot, interceding for Abraham. This means that if Abraham's descendants do sin, that God himself should die. Abraham falls into a deep sleep. A terror of darkness comes over him. God reveals the future. His people will suffer in a foreign land but eventually be freed. God will judge those that enslaved them. God himself seals the covenant. It is made. Sarai gives birth. Sarai, now old, still childless, is getting impatient too. In her old age, she thinks she can force the covenant line to exist if they can create a child, and would suggest they start a family themselves, even though God has already promised them a son. Since she is barren, she gives Abraham her servant Hagar to conceive a child. Ishmael is born, and though he is not the one who the covenant shall continue through, he grows into a great nation in his own right. A talented archer and proud man, he is the progenitor of the Arab people. He is the ancestor of Mohammed, who founds Islam. Then some years later, God appears directly to Abraham. "I am God Almighty. Walk among me and be blameless." Abraham becomes Abraham, Sarai becomes Sarah, and they are promised a son, Isaac. In him, says God, the covenant shall be allowed to continue. This bloodline shall form what is called the Abrahamic religions, God's promise to Abraham. Isaac is born, circumcised on the 8th day, almost sacrificed, and later marries Rebekah, handpicked by a very old Abraham. I will say that the first circumcision was Abraham, now called himself, and his household. The rest, as they say, is history. In summary, Abraham heard God's voice in Mesopotamia and followed it to the land promised to him. Along the way, he institutes the first tithe, first circumcision, and the first covenant with God, securing land from Egypt to the Euphrates. He is tested, but gives everything he has to his God and his people. Watching Israel rise, it's remarkable to see the legacy of this man.